Chapter 5. Wednesday, April 6th, 0011 New Era. 0142 hours. 3 days later. Scott bolted upright in his bunk, his eyes squinting in the darkness. What in the world? In the upper bunk, David stirred beneath the covers. It repeated for several seconds before Scott's eyes shot open wide. The comms. He leapt out of bed and scrambled toward the closet. David blinked and propped up.
What?
The comms! The comms are going off!
The comms are going off! We've got 3 minutes!
2.5! Let's go!
They collided into Beacon and Jaden as soon as they left the room.
Time! Minute and a half!
Outside, Falcon Platoon's operatives flat-tracked toward the hangar. Vulture 7 glimmered in the night, the ground beneath it illuminated by the soft red and gold glow of running lights on its underbelly. Tacker waited next to it.
Everyone in the transport! Armor up!
Sir, yes, sir!
The operatives dashed up the Vulture's ramp. They opened their lockers where the Eden combat armor awaited. Lightweight, flexible, and technologically superior to anything else on the planet. It was the international symbol of the Eden operative. Its blue and silver finish dulled everything around it. It personified pride. The operatives fastened their helmets and lowered the sky blue visors over their eyes and noses. Tacker ordered the pilot to lift. The pilot acknowledged, and Vulture 7 ascended over the airstrip.
Listen up, everyone. This is a hot drop. Approximately 1 hour ago, 2 Bachma carriers entered Earth's atmosphere over Chicago with a full fighter escort. They dropped in the middle of the city, and all citizens have been ordered underground. Expect heavy casualties. Hawk, Condor, Griffin, units were initially dispatched, but they got hit hard. We've been called in to provide support. Medics, be prepared for extensive casualties. If you have any reason to suspect no boats are in the air, alert someone immediately. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not there. If any materialize, take cover and hunker down. Also, Chicago is out of power, so make sure your TCVs are on.
The operatives acknowledged and activated the true color vision in their visors. The world took on an ethereal hue. Tacker swung toward the cockpit.
ETA!
5 minutes, sir.
5 minutes, people! Clear your minds, get focused, and get ready to land!
Hope for a smooth descent vanished as soon as Vulture 7 entered Chicago. Ground plasma fire blasted against its metal hull. Behind it, a small fleet of Vultures followed.
Touchdown in 30! We're landing behind the barricade on South Michigan. We should be able to exit without resistance. Stick together! I'm not chasing anyone down!
The stomach-turning rush of descent kicked in, and the Vulture clumped to a landing. The rear door immediately burst open.
All right, everyone out! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go!
The remnants of a building lay strewn across South Michigan Avenue. The barricade. Gunfire erupted on the other side. Burnt asphalt polluted the air. Injured Eden operatives littered the landing zone, and rows of soldiers fired from atop the rubble. Tacker shot a glare to Sasha and Natasha.
Medics, get to the wounded!
The women disappeared into the throng of injured. Tacker continued up the mound.
All right, now there's a company of Bachma en route to the barricade as we speak. Be prepared for heavy resistance.
Scott and Beacon reached the summit of the barricade first, and their eyes immediately widened. Fire illuminated the cratered streets of South Michigan. Lightning white plasma bolts streaked across the ground. Human shrieks mixed with gunfire. It was a war zone. Bachma foot soldiers amassed in the streets. Even from a distance, their unmistakable crimson-purple skin identified them, and their nauseous black and brown body armor seemed to perfectly define their role. Mingled with them were the brutish beasts themselves, the Conrasis, the war beasts of the Bachma. They tromped ahead like miniature fur-covered tyrannosaurs as Bachma riders sat firm atop them and blasted the barricade with their mounted plasma cannons. The Conrasis' soulless spider eyes roamed the battlefield above their grotesquely excessive jaws. Scott dropped to a knee and propped his assault rifle. For a moment, held fire. It was surreal. It couldn't be real. Beacon ducked to avoid plasma fire, and then he too propped his assault rifle.
There's no way in hell we're gonna hold this off!
David and Henry hit the summit next. Donald, harnessed with a minigun, followed. Beside them, Jaden glared through his sniper scope. David looked toward the Texan and then at Henry.
You okay over there?
Yeah, I'm good.
A white flash erupted several yards past Scott, and he felt the wave of impact wash over him. Someone had been hit. He whipped around to see Ziegler tumble backward down the barricade. Ziegler's faceplate smoldered and he hollered. Scott said to Beacon.
I'll be right back.
He shouldered his E-35 and rushed toward the fallen operative.
Hold still, I got you.
Ziegler struggled, and the scorched helmet was removed.
You okay?
A bloodied bruise bulged in the center of Ziegler's forehead.
Yeah, watch out.
Ziegler brushed past Scott, picked up his assault rifle, and charged up the hill again. Scott observed the soldier for a moment, then returned to Beacon.
You alright?
No.
Beacon said nothing and continued to fire.
Major,
Lyland said as he approached Tacker.
they've confirmed. There are reinforcements coming in from farther down the road. We've got to keep holding them.
Tacker nodded.
You've got something else to worry about, though. There's a team from Cougar pinned down a couple of blocks southwest of here, near the Van Buren-South Wabash intersection. According to comm chatter, they're under direct assault from at least a dozen hostiles, and they're too wounded to put up any real resistance.
Tacker crossed his arms.
And we're getting them out.
Not you. You're staying here. Henrik is going after him. He's got 2 guys from Delta ready to go. But I want you to give him a few more. A small team. Just an in-and-out operation. They should be able to just follow the shuttle rail.
With all due respect, sir, I wouldn't trust Henrik to walk my dog, let alone lead a rescue party.
That's why I want some of your guys with him. I would send you, but I want you here. I don't want to risk you getting dropped on some random errand and leaving me with a platoon full of rookies. If I lose you, they're not going to give me another major.
Understood, sir.
Tacker examined his operatives and made quick decisions.
Remington, McRae, Jurgen, Timmons, over here right now.
4's too many. Send 3.
Tacker nodded as Lyland stepped away.
Correction. Jurgen, you stay put, the rest of you come.
Scott, Beacon, and Jaden arrived a moment later, as did Henrik and his operatives, 2 privates named Donner and Wilkins. Tacker dropped to a knee.
Here's the deal, gentlemen. We've got some guys from Cougar Platoon pinned down several blocks southwest. Some are wounded. The streets you're looking for are Van Buren and South Wabash. There should be shuttle rail along that route. Track their comm signals and get some help. Search and rescue, not rocket science. Who's the medic here?
The operatives exchanged looks, though none spoke. Tacker's eyes widened and he glared at Henrik.
Did Lyland explain this to you before?
Yes, sir.
And you didn't take a trashing medic? Vec!
He cut off Henrik's reply.
Rhodes, get over here.
Sasha arrived a moment later and Tacker explained the situation again.
If anything happens to Lieutenant Henrik, Remington will assume command. Understand, Private?
Scott was momentarily taken aback.
Yes, sir.
He was the executive officer? As much as it didn't make sense, Scott knew it was Tacker's only option. Everyone in Falcon was an Alpha private. One of them had to do it.
Good. Go!
The small band of operatives moved immediately. Henrik led them to the far right of the mound, where he signaled them to lower themselves to a knee.
We're using the alleys to get to South Wabash, but we have to cross the barricade to get to the first one. From there, we'll start tracking them. We'll all cross at once so we don't give the Backmer a sequence to shoot at. What are your names?
After each had responded, Henrik continued.
All right. The count will be on 3. Then we run. 1, 2, 3.
Henrik launched over the barricade and skidded into the nearest alleyway. The others did the same. No plasma bolts followed them, and they soon found themselves alone and out of sight. At the far end of the alley stood a brick partition with a rusty ladder. Henrik trotted toward it.
According to intelligence, a building collapsed earlier about 100 yards that way.
He pointed toward the brick partition.
We'll have to find a way around it once we get to it.
He gripped the ladder.
Wilkins, come up after me. Then Donna, you.
He pointed to Beacon.
Then you 2.
Jaden and Sasha.
Remington goes last.
As Henrik and Wilkins climbed, Jaden leaned toward Beacon.
Should he be shouting something like that?
Probably not.
Each pair that followed Henrik and Wilkins maintained distance between the pair in front and behind them, and eventually all had crossed over the brick partition. They found themselves bunched together on the other side of the alley. It was perfectly symmetrical with the alley from which they had come, though it exited out onto South Wabash, the main avenue they were seeking. Henrik and Wilkins strode toward the mouth of the alley as the cluster of other operatives followed close behind. Rubble walled off South Wabash, as it did South Michigan. Unlike South Michigan, however, this wall was impassable. A segment of the shuttle rail was down as well. Henrik emerged from the alley first.
This is South Wabash. Van Buren should be a little south of here. We've got to find a way to cross this mound. Come on!
Beacon crept beside Scott and leaned close to him.
Does this knocker know what a come is?
Scott hesitated. His thoughts were the same. This guy was announcing their presence as if they had just stepped into a party.
Maybe there's no Bachma here.
If there are any, they sure as bloody hell know where we are.
Jaden caught up with them.
This guy's a moron.
Moron or not, he was in charge.
Just follow his orders.
Henrik stood in the center of the street and propped his hands on his hips.
We're gonna have to get over this rubble.
Beacon grunted.
Right, what are we gonna do? Climb?
Yes. Now what looks like the easiest route
He's
up?
being sarcastic.
Sir, may I suggest an alternative route?
There was a building across the street that looked accessible. They could probably move through it and come out on the other side of the rubble.
Do you see an alternative route anywhere, privates?
Well, yes.
We are climbing, Remington. If you're scared of heights, get over it quick.
Human and Bachma bodies littered South Michigan as Charlie Squad continued to engage. Several additional platoons joined alongside them, and the two opposing forces stalemated. Above the battle, a dogfight between Vindicators and Couriers, Bachma fighter planes, broke loose. Back on South Wabash, the search for a path up the rubble continued. Each attempt to climb met failure, and the atmosphere of impatience grew palpable.
Sir,
Scott said to Henrik as he stepped beside Wilkins.
I strongly suggest an alternative route.
In that instant, two sounds simultaneously erupted. The first was Henrik as he whipped around and shouted,
Remington!
The second was plasma fire. Flashes of white streaked toward them, and Henrik, Scott, and Donner were jolted violently. A bolt struck Wilkins in the chest, and he was thrown against the rubble, where three more blasts punctured his torso. Scott ducked back as blood splattered across his armor, and he bolted to the far alley behind Henrik and Donner. The jig was up. The other operatives parted in the opposite direction. Henrik screamed as a plasma bolt ripped through his leg, and he stumbled several yards from cover. Donner grabbed him and dragged him into the alley. From across South Wabash, Beacon howled in anger.
I'm up to 90!
Henrik moaned as Donner secured him against a wall. Scott skidded into the alley.
Can anyone over there see where that came from?
He asked through the comm. Beacon surveyed the corner of his alley, and a volley of plasma blasted his way. He ducked back.
Best I can see they're on your side, about 30 or so meters down. They're in the next alley down. It's on your end.
How many?
No clue.
Scott looked over at Henrik. The lieutenant's armor had been penetrated, and his leg was torn open. He was out of the fight. Scott was in command. Only days before, the guilt of not knocking on Tacker's door had consumed him. It had consumed him enough to make him swear to himself that he would never hesitate again. He wanted to remember the guilt for that reason. And now, he was the one. There was no hesitation.
Everyone, here's what I want you to do. Sasha, inform Major Tacker of our status and tell him I have assumed command.
Yes, sir.
Beacon, engage them from right where you are. Donner, you'll do the same from over here. Distract them. Jay, while they're doing that, I want you to break into that building right in front of you and get as high as you can on the other side. Find a window, get in a comfortable sniping position. Call me when you've done that.
Got it.
I'm going to mirror you on this end through this building. When we're both in position on the other side, we'll hit them at the same time from opposite directions.
Gotcha.
Scott drew a deep breath.
Let's go!
Beacon and Donner engaged the Bachma as Scott and Jaden traversed their respective buildings, Jaden up a fire escape and Scott through a steel emergency door. Once Scott had crossed through the building, he found a similar steel door. The Bachma shouted to one another and reloaded their plasma rifles beyond it. Scott pressed against the door and waited. Jaden's voice broke through the comm.
I'm laying down on the roof. I can see them good. There are 4 of them.
Can they see you?
Not right now.
How many can you take?
I think I can get 2 before they realize I'm here.
2. Good enough.
Okay, take out as many as you can and tell me when they find you out. Go!
Going.
Jaden squinted through the scope of his sniper rifle as the Bachma exchanged fire with Beacon and Donner. He eased the crosshairs over the nearest Bachma's forehead. His finger flexed and the gun barrel exploded with a flash of orange. Blood sprayed from behind the Bachma's head.
1 down.
He cracked the bolt action and slid the crosshairs over a second target.
2 down. They're on to me.
The Texan rolled back. Scott closed his eyes, took a breath, and slammed his body against the steel door. The door gave way and momentum carried him into the alley, where the 2 battle-scarred Bachma whipped around to face him. His finger took control and he yanked the trigger. The 2 Bachma toppled backward before they could fire a shot. Scott stood paralyzed. Gun exhaust filtered the air. The Bachma lay crumpled, face up on the concrete. He stared at their corpses. Assault rifle shouldered, he drew nearer to them. He had never seen Bachma at such close range before. Their cheekbones bulged from the crimson-purple leather of their skin. Their eyes, black eyes without visible pupils, stared lifelessly skyward. Alien insignias covered their breastplates in a grotesque gold, and their plasma rifles lay strewn beside their talonless claws. Beneath them oozed a puddle of dark red blood. Scott propped his hands against his knees and gazed at them. It was still surreal. Finally, he breathed into his calm.
Target's down.
Tacker ducked to avoid plasma fire as he stumbled toward David.
Jurgen!
David held his fire.
Yes, sir.
We have reinforcements coming right now. They'll be here in about 10 minutes. Once they arrive, we're gonna press over the mound and into the avenue. Be ready.
Tacker glanced at Henry.
How's he doing?
David hesitated.
Very good, sir.
All right, you take care of him.
Yes, sir.
Tacker nodded and continued across the barricade. Shouldering his assault rifle, Scott approached the now clustered team.
Attention, everybody. Hendricks is incapacitated. Therefore, I am assuming command. If something should happen to me, leadership falls to Beacon.
The Irishman looked impassive.
Get Wilkins' body and put it in the alley for now. If anyone is low on ammunition, take his. He won't be needing it.
Beacon raised a brow.
And Henrik?
Scott appraised the lieutenant.
Sir, can you still walk?
I don't think so.
He turned to Donner.
Get him to his feet and help him along. We can't bog down here.
Scott inspected the building alongside the far alley, where he noticed for the first time that it was the same building that caused the rubble. Though the top half of it had been blown across the street, the lower half remained intact. It must have been a strafe attack on the 2 streets, but the bottom of this building still looked passable.
Come on, we're crossing through here.
Beacon eyed Henrik.
We should have been doing that all along.
For all I knew, the foundation was damaged.
Scott didn't bother with a response. He slung his assault rifle over his shoulder, jerked open a side door, and stepped inside. Dust hung in the building, but it was passable. The group exercised caution as they trekked from office to empty office until they emerged clean on the other side. South Wabash came into full view. Gunfire echoed ahead, and Scott crept up the alley to the edge of the street. The scene was clear now. The pinned operatives from Cougar Platoon took cover behind 2 war-torn cars at the edge of a squat structure. Farther down the street, plasma bolts shot in their direction. Scott's eyes narrowed.
We're not going to get into the open. That plasma fire is too heavy. We're taking the inside route again. We'll keep moving through buildings until we get to them.
He turned to Sasha.
Take Henrik. I want Donner free.
The plan was set into motion, and the team traversed from one building to the next. When they reached the alley along the squat structure's edge, Scott searched for a door. He found one, but it was locked. He launched 2 solid kicks against the doorway, and it burst open.
Find a room in here that can act as a temporary hospital. We have to assume they have heavily wounded. They wouldn't still be here if they didn't. Jay, get as high as you can again. Find a window and work on those Bachma. You're on your own. Just go do your thing.
Jaden acknowledged and weaved up a stairwell. Scott led the rest of the team ahead. The structure was undamaged, though projectile and plasma fire erupted from beyond the walls. Muffled shouts echoed outside. They were close. When Scott stepped into the large room that formed the building's corner, it became clear why the operatives were still outside. Only one window offered access to the inside. The corner lacked anything else. Scott pressed against the edge of the window and peered outside. He could see the pinned soldiers. 3 wounded were among them, sprawled behind the cover vehicles. There was no way they'd last there. Plasma flashed toward the window and Scott ducked back inside. 3 wounded. 1 window. The vehicles were on the verge of destruction. Scott knelt as the other operatives watched him. His mind raced. The vehicles. If only the vehicles were closer to the window. Then they'd have enough cover to ferry the wounded inside. It hit him. Scott leapt to a stand and returned to the window.
Guys!
He shouted to the pinned unit.
Sit tight for 1 minute. We're on our way.
Scott swiveled to face his team.
Who can hotwire a car?
Donner raised his hand.
Beacon, go with Donner outside and see if you can't find another vehicle. The bigger the better.
Beacon rubbed his neck.
I saw a big old van across the street on the way here.
A van. Perfect.
That'll work. Go get it. Give Donner as much cover as you can. You're going to park that van right in front of the window. We're extending the wall of cars.
Right.
Beacon said as he and Donner retreated back through the building.
Hurry, we don't have much time.
Jaden knelt down beside a 5th-floor window and leaned against the wall. He was right above the pinned operatives. Perfect position. He snaked his hand toward the window, unlocked it, and slid it upward just enough to leave a slit for his sniper rifle. Maneuvering the rifle into position and slipping the barrel outside, he squinted through the scope. The Bachma suppressors were, as before, clustered in an alley.
I think there's about 5 or 6.
He said through the comm. He eased the crosshairs over the corner of the alley and waited for one of the suppressors to lean around. It happened right away. There was a puff of red, and Jaden worked the bolt action.
1 down.
Beacon and Donner bolted across the street.
Keep at him, Jay. We need time to hotwire.
I'm on him.
The bolt action cracked through the comm.
2 down.
The Bachma suppressors halted their assault as a 3rd fell. Beacon and Donner skidded to the van. Unlocked. Beacon slid into the passenger seat as Donner set to hotwire. Several twisted wires later, the van roared to life. Beacon jerked his door closed.
Go, go!
Donner slammed the van into reverse and manhandled the wheel toward the wall of cars. Only seconds later, it screeched to a stop in front of the window. Beacon leapt from the passenger door as Donner climbed over the center console. The wall of cars was extended. The window was covered. Time to move.
Let's go!
Scott said. He scampered out of the window, rolled to the ground behind the van, and dashed to the pinned operatives behind the wall of cars. A goateed man awaited him. His armor was charred with scorch marks.
Delta Trooper Grammer of Cougar Platoon, sir. We have 3 wounded. 2 good to go. Everyone else is dead.
Scott's ears perked.
What's the condition of the wounded?
They're pretty bad off.
Can they be moved through the window?
Grammer glanced to the window.
Better than keeping them here, sir.
Scott pivoted around.
Beacon, give us a hand!
As Scott, Beacon, and Grammer transferred the wounded through the window, Donner, Jaden, and another unidentified man behind the cars held off the Bachma attack. After several minutes of suppression fire and struggle, the transfer was accomplished. Sasha wasted no time in attending to the wounded as soon as they were secure. Beacon, Donner, and Jaden continued to engage the Bachma as Scott, Grammer, and the unidentified man slipped inside. Grammer caught his breath and turned to Scott.
Our team, sir.
He motioned toward a stocky individual, the only other uninjured man.
Gamma Private Vows, our techie, and the 3 wounded are Commander Jose Diaz, Lieutenant Bowen, and Gamma Private Parsons. Commander Diaz took command when our captain fell. We're all that's left of a team of 20, sir.
Scott lifted a brow. Sir. He shifted his peripherals down to his armor, where dried blood, Wilkins blood, crusted over his name badge. His insignia was completely hidden. Grammer didn't know he was an alpha. A moment of decision ticked in Scott's mind, and he answered.
Scott Remington, what were you doing here?
Beacon's voice interrupted from outside.
We could use a bloody handout here.
Scott hurried to the window and motioned for Grammer to follow.
How many down?
Beacon laughed.
None.
What about you, Jay?
The Texan's voice crackled through the comm.
I've been working on the ones farther up the road. I killed one and hit another, but there's still more. I think there's 2 or 3 still here, but they know I'm here now. It's about 5 or 6 more down the road.
Are the only Bachma here the ones in the alley?
Yep.
Scott climbed out the window and ducked behind the van. He glanced to Grammer.
I guess if you had any grenades left, you'd be using them?
Yes, sir. We used them earlier. You should have seen how many Bachman there were before. Way more than we thought there'd be. We think they must have used up all of theirs, too.
Scott unfastened a grenade from his belt and placed his finger on the activation button.
Give me 3 seconds of cover. Fire everything.
Beacon, Donner, and Grammer opened fire. Above, Jaden did the same. Scott pressed the button, whipped up from behind the van, and flung the small orb toward the alley. The operatives ducked down as soon as he released it. The grenade ricocheted off the wall of the alley and bounced out of view. An explosion boomed. Scott leapt over the hood of the van.
Charge the alley, come on!
Jaden's voice sounded through the comm.
I got him pinned down the street. Go, go, go!
They reached the alley several seconds later. The smell of open flesh hung in the air as they penetrated the smoke, assault rifles poised to fire on any survivors. Remains were scattered across the ground, and entrails dripped from the brick walls. The ground beneath them turned moist.
They're moving! The Bachma down the street are moving!
They were trying to escape. Scott charged into the street. There were 3 Bachma in full retreat.
Stop them!
As soon as he, Beacon, Donner, and Grammer were in the open, they knelt, propped their assault rifles, and attacked the triggers. The Bachma toppled over. Scott leapt to his feet and bolted toward the alley where they'd come from. The 3 other men followed close behind. They charged around the corner and trained their assault rifles, but without need. There were no Bachma left. Their mission was accomplished. As reinforcements arrived from Richmond, the battle on South Michigan turned in Eden's favor. Several colonels, Leland included, led a full assault against the Bachma foot soldiers. They charged into the Bachma stronghold where an intense melee began. David and Henry were in the onslaught and adopted a back-to-back protection system. With David's on-the-spot tactical commands, the 2 men formed an effective duo. Nonetheless, the battle was far from over. Once the Bachma corpses were collected, Scott and his team returned to the squat structure. Jaden remained on his 5th floor perch where he kept watch over South Wabash. As soon as Scott re-entered the makeshift hospital, he stepped over to Sasha.
How are they?
Diaz is stable. Parsons should be shortly. Bowen will be okay too. They should all be okay, provided they aren't here much longer. They will need more medical treatment, though. More than I can give them.
Scott turned to Grammer.
Why were you out here?
We were initially sent to disable the southernmost carrier.
He motioned down the avenue.
But we met far heavier resistance than Command expected. We had a cover unit, but they got ambushed before we were even set up to go. The 5 of us are the last alive out of a strike force of 20.
You were sent here to disable one of the Bachma carriers?
Yes, sir. Command wanted salvage, and that was the best way to get it. It also sends a strong message to the Bachma when one of their ships doesn't come back home.
A thought materialized in Scott's mind.
How far is the carrier from here?
Not that far. Stay down Wabash, take a right on Harrison, then left down Clark. The carrier's in the Clark-Polk intersection. That was the plan.
Scott looked away for a moment, still thinking. 5 men. That's what he had. Was that crazy? His gaze returned to Grammer.
Is it still possible to disable it?
Grammer's jaw sagged, and he cleared his throat.
Yes, sir. We still have Vows. He was the assigned technician for this thing.
Beacon eyed Scott from the corner of the room. Scott turned and stepped out of the room where he adjusted the frequency of his comm.
Major?
There was a moment of static before Tacker's voice emerged on the other side.
Tacker here. You get them out yet?
Yes, sir. Area cleared.
Great.
Here it went.
Sir, with Command's permission, I'd like to complete Cougar Platoon's objective. They were ordered to disable the southern Bachma carrier.
Are you joking?
No, sir. I think we have a chance. The Bachma here have been isolated and things are quiet. I think we might be able to get close enough in to make a real run at this thing.
How many of you are there?
5 able to go.
You want to assault a Bachma carrier with 5 operatives?
Yes, sir. It's the last thing they'd expect.
You got that right. Give me a minute to talk to the colonel.
Leland was in the midst of the offensive when Tacker's voice burst through his headset.
Colonel, I have Remington on the line. He wants to make a run at the southern carrier. You know anything about that?
Leland ducked behind a barricade.
Yes. Command wanted salvage. That's what Cougar was doing before. Remington wants to do what?
He wants to assault the carrier.
Did he lose his brain?
I have no idea, sir.
Leland reloaded his assault rifle and opened fire into the Bachma foot soldiers.
How many men does he have?
He says 5. I shouldn't even be asking you this.
The hell? He wants to assault the carrier with 5 men?
That's what he says, sir.
I'm talking to him.
The channel closed. Leland adjusted to message Scott.
This is Leland. Are you requesting permission to assault the carrier?
Yes, sir. Things are calm on this end. I think we can catch them off guard.
Do you have any idea what you're asking?
Yes, sir. I wouldn't ask if I didn't think we could do it.
Leland grew quiet. The request was suicide, but there was something unexpected in Scott's tone. It was confidence. Even in addressing the colonel, it was total confidence. It was the tone of a veteran. Eden loved salvage. They grew giddy at the mention of it. 5 men would never survive a carrier assault, but they didn't have to. None of them had to. If a technician survived long enough to reach the engine room and shut it down, the mission was accomplished. Their survival was unnecessary. But was a captured carrier worth the lives of 5 men? Could 5 men even reach the engine room?
Do you really think you can do this?
Positive, sir.
Do it. Just get to the engine room. Make that your priority. Then do what you can.
Thank you, sir.
Good luck.
Scott returned to the hospital.
Listen up, everyone. The original objective for this mission was to disable the Southern carrier.
Beacon stood from his perch in the corner.
We are going to take it upon ourselves to complete this objective.
Vouse's jaw hung loose. He was speechless.
Beacon, Donner, Grimer, Vouse, and myself are going to infiltrate the carrier and deactivate its main drive. Hendricks going to assist Sasha with the wounded. Jay, stay where you are and protect the hospital. Just do your thing.
Yes, sir.
Scott slammed a fresh clip into his assault rifle.
Let's have some fun.